So I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and the reason I went to Penn was it's the only place I got in. I didn't get into Columbia, I didn't get into Cornell. And interestingly, the architecture school is right here. I didn't go to that one. The one I went to was right down this path. But we built a new building just after I left. And this is the original library on the campus, and it became a fine arts library and classroom building. And when I was there, they wanted to tear it down. And it's now considered one of the most beautiful buildings in the country. And they put it all over Penn website, when they promote themselves. So it's interesting how tastes change. When I was there, the building had to be modern. And if it wasn't a glass box, it was an eyesore. And if you could afford to, you'd tear it down. Now we revere these old buildings. And it was restored by Venturi. So it's a beautiful restoration. It's good as new. A couple of my professors included Bob Venturi and Denise Scott Brown, who became his wife. So they were both my teachers. And then I didn't study in Kahn's studio, but I was at Penn with Kahn for 7 years, so I knew what he was talking about. Faculty member most influential on me was Edmund Bacon, who was rebuilding the city of Philadelphia. He was Philadelphia city planner. And he wrote a book called, so he was a city planner and also a faculty member, head of the City Planning Commission. He wrote a book called Design of Cities, which is used by some of my colleagues here at Pratt to this day. It's a wonderful book on city planning. I worked for some interesting offices. One of them was Harrison and Abramovitz. I worked on what's called the Empire State Plaza complex, government complex in Albany, New York, built when Rockefeller was governor. So Harrison did Rockefeller Center, United Nations, Lincoln Center, Rockefeller University, Empire State Mall. Anybody know what the trick was? He married a Rockefeller. That's how you do it. I had a very interesting job with an architect named Ulrich Franzen, sort of third generation major modern architect. And he had a grant from the Ford Foundation to investigate future city technologies. What if we put these tubes under the roads in New York and put all the traffic in there, get them off the streets? And one of the technologies we explored was computers were becoming capable at this point. This is the late 60s. What if you could bing, ring at a telephone pole, and zoom, a taxi shows up? What's that called? Uber. Who knew it was going to be your cell phone? Who knew there was going to be cell phones in the 60s? But so a lot of the technology we work with, self-driving cars, stuff like that we worked on are now happening. I've done a couple books. One of them we'll be using in this course is on I got to spend more than $2 on a laser pointer. How many people shop on Wish.com? It's really cool. It's like the Chinese Amazon. Laser pointers, $2. Jeans, $3. Problem is they ship them by boat. So it takes about 3 weeks to get your stuff instead of 2 days. But really great prices. I have another book. This is on Kahn's spiritual philosophy. This is on Kahn's buildings, and it's with the publisher right now. Did a book on creativity, a book on the mythologist Joseph Campbell, and a book on ecology. So that's some of my books. And when I got to New York, I was an environmental sculptor. And this new movement was happening in art. there was this real radical feeling of we're in a new world, new concepts of space, and sculpture, rather than being an object you put in the room, you could make the whole room the sculpture. What do you do to the spatial experience of the whole room rather than an object that you stand there and look at? So I pioneered that and did major work, and then I became director of the, this is for the Architectural League, I became director of the Architectural League program and was the curator of other people doing this kind of thing. What I did here was I put a diagonal grid on the floor with black tape, and then I put these panels up, making a sort of maze in the space. I'm director of research for Timeship. You'll find us at timeship.org. And it's a life extension research and next generation cryonics project. Our clients intend to be immortal, and they've spent over $100 million to turn off aging and find the genetic cause of aging and turn it off. So if not all creatures age. If you have a shark the size of this room, it could be 30 years old, it could be 300 years old. There's no difference. Sharks don't age. Well, why do we age and they don't? So a lot of people looking for this. Actually, what's happened is these tech billionaires, were all in their 20s and 30s when they started their companies, but now they're in their 50s and they're starting to age. So Larry Page, who's Larry Page? Founder of Google. Jeff Bezos, everybody knows who Jeff Bezos is, Amazon. Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, the largest business software company. They've all set up companies to find the cause of aging and turn it off. We have about 10-year jump on what they're doing, because we've been doing it longer. But you'll find us at, so the architect on this project is a Pratt grad, Stephen Valentine. And we have a book called Timeship, The Architecture of Immortality. And we couldn't get .com, so we have .org. Let's get the O out of there. So we have 1,000 acres in Texas, outside of San Antonio. And we've built the building now in virtual reality. So the whole 1,000-acre site, every tree, you put on the goggles, and you can move through this. So this is a video clip of a fly-through. So the lamps are on top, and the cryonic storage is below. And then these spherical tanks hold the liquid nitrogen that freezes people. So if our clients don't make it, they're going to be frozen. So this is the freezing facility. And then we're able to survive for a decade if the whole grid goes down. These are our geothermal generators. So that's Timeship. I'm director of research and I do a lot of the writing. This is when I get an idea, I make a website. So this is a website for my creativity book, and the excerpts from it and reviews and stuff like that. And then I'm interested in generative genomics. Anybody have a studio with Haresh Lavani? So he's responsible for all, and you go to the restrooms in the basement, all those geometric forms you see in the glass cases, that's Haresh. And he's redoing all of science based on morphological transformations. So for example, if you're familiar with the periodic table, it lines up all the elements, but there are a few places where it's fudged. They don't fit right. He discovered if you put a periodic table in 5 dimensions, the anomalies go away, but you get a half a dozen new elements. So he's redone chemistry, he's redone geometry. And the people thinking this way, very prominent among them, well, there's something called Game of Life. Anybody know John Conway's Game of Life? So this is a website I do on generative genomics. And if you were going to make an oak tree, you would not, right, put a telephone pole in the ground, nail sticks to it, and glue leaves to the sticks. What would you do? Plant an acorn. Let the stupid thing make itself. What's the most complicated thing in the universe? They like to say. The human brain. How many people have made one? Every one of us. Started with a little bit of DNA code, and you built the whole thing. Why can't we make our cell phones that way? What's all these people with tweezers in these, hazard suits? A quarter mile of them, making little cell phones. Just, give them the genomic instructions, let them make themselves. So, John Conway created Game of Life, and it's done with cellular automata. Jesus, somebody fell 5 miles out of an airplane with a parachute and survived. Well, no thanks. So what you do is you imagine a checkerboard of all white squares. And you do 2 things. You make some black, and maybe start randomly. You make a set of rules for iterations. Say this is second 0, and I have some black squares. And I make some rules. The rules say if a black square is surrounded by 3 or less other black squares, it'll die of loneliness. If it's surrounded by 5 or more black squares, it'll die of suffocation. If it's surrounded by 4 black squares, it'll reproduce. So the square next to it will become black. And you take a piece of graph paper, you make your initial conditions, you make your rules, and they say, well, what will happen in the next iteration? Well, you follow all those rules and you fill in the next piece of graph paper. Well, the people doing this were really delighted when they got computers, because they didn't have to keep filling in graph papers with pencils. And there are all kinds of patterns that these will generate. So they worked really hard. It took years to develop all this. But this is an arrangement, initial condition, with John Conway's rule of Game of Life rules. And this arrangement is manufacturing these guys. So here's a set of rules that's making something. Now there are two limitations. A, it's in 2 dimensions. It's easy to do it in 3 dimensions. And B, it's in the computer. You're going to get it out of the computer. So I got interested in this, and there are people doing it now. Niall Gershenfeld is working with Airbus to have these little guys make jumbo jets. And so if you look up Gershenfeld on YouTube, his lectures and pictures, he's at the MIT Fab Lab. So I got interested in this, so I just created a website to follow the people doing it. I haven't been updating it for a few years, so that's kind of out of date, but it's one of my websites. I got interested in mythology and movies. So I have a website, cinemadiscourse.com, that I do with a brilliant guy named John David Ebert, who we've both sort of lost interest, so we have not been updating it. This last one is 2018. So, but occasionally I'll put up but it's really good for classic movies. I blog at prn.fm Mondays at 10 a.m. and all the back blogs are at visionaries.podbean.com. So I have about 100 interviews with the kind of people I'm talking about. You know, get a hold of them and see if they come on my radio show. I try to record my lectures. I just showed you, go to John Lobell, then go to my channel, so there's a little round picture of me, then go to playlists, and there's some on technology, and a lot on history of architecture, and then a lot on Khan and a lot on Frank Lloyd Wright. Actually, hang on, let me. I did, who can tell me what a MOOC is? M-O-O-C. We don't use the term anymore, but for a while, it was like self-driving cars. It's going to revolutionize the world. MOOC is Massive Open Online Course. Now we just call it online teaching. But the thought was, about 5 years ago, when it became all the rage, that all the universities are going to shut down. The way the internet has been shutting down all the newspapers, Amazon's been shutting down all the stores. It was feared this was going to shut down all the schools. One of my colleagues from Pratt Ivan Shumkov, he's Central European, I'm not sure what country. Founded Build Academy. So a European online educational company had a competition for a course on architecture, and he won, and he did a course on modern architecture. He had 20,000 students. So he said, okay, I'm not going back to them, I'm opening my own company. So I agreed. I did about 10 lectures each on Kahn and Venturi, 60s radical architecture, a bunch of other stuff. We did a whole 40-lecture course on Frank Lloyd Wright. We had 30 students complete the course. It's like, this fad went off the cliff. So I was going to do one on creativity. I said, wow, if we have 20,000 students, they all have to buy my book on creativity, and 10% of them do, we sell 2,000 books. I didn't even bother to do the course after I have 30 students finish Frank Lloyd Wright. So if we go to login, now you can do this. You have to register, but you don't have to pay anything. This isn't even my email, I just made it up. My Mac email is johnlobell@mac.com. So he has modern architecture, contemporary architecture, but he hasn't done the editing on the lectures I did. But our Frank Lloyd Wright course is up. So there's about 40 lectures, and the nifty thing is they're about 10 minutes each. So a MOOC lecture. So we recorded these at a studio at NYU. It's set up exactly for this. And the rule is it starts blinking. It doesn't cut me off, but after 7 minutes, it's blinking. These lectures aren't supposed to be longer than 7 minutes. 7 minutes, one idea. Once the students have mastered that, go on to the next one. That way you really learn something rather than I'm just bloviating here. And you might remember 10% of it. So here's tall buildings. This is Yvonne, this is me.
Well, we are at the fourth lecture of this 5th week of our course on Frank Lloyd Wright, and we saw some of his projects from the late 40s and 50s, and he's known mostly for horizontal,
because they both enclose ribs and lungs and heart, etc. This is an interesting
Sullivan
point.
has applied.
This is
So the mechanical. So in that sense, it is organically integrates the structure and mechanical. And now here is the Wainwright building by Louis Sullivan. Wright was worked on this building. And here we see Sullivan's ideas of the 3 or 5, depending upon how you look at it, base, shaft, and then cornice for a skyscraper. But then when you get around to the side where no one's going to see it, it's just plain brick. So it's like Sullivan has applied a suit of clothes to his building. And Wright really objects to that. He says the exterior of the building should grow out of the interior just the way. So,
well, that's going to be a difference between Kahn and Venturi. Kahn, the aesthetic of the building comes from the spaces and the structure and the materials. Venturi, you make a serviceable building, then you stick a facade on it. It might have nothing to do with what's behind the facade. So 2 very different philosophies of architecture, and architecture has been debating these 2 indefinitely. Well, if you're interested in a free course on Frank Lloyd Wright, that's where you can get one. Build Academy, and just follow the prompts. So I try to record my lectures. We're recording this one right now, and put them on YouTube. Now, I don't have an argument either way. A lot of my faculty colleagues object to this, and this lecture is my intellectual property. I have the right to say, you can't record my lecture, and if you do, don't post it. I'm not saying that. You can record my lecture, you can do anything you want with it. But if someone who feels otherwise, I have to respect them. And particularly, it's interesting how, one's socioeconomic position affects one's thoughts. I'm full-time with tenure. If someone's part-time, say, what, are you going to record my lecture, fire me, and then just play the YouTube next year? So, you can have either position about this. My Kahn book is available in Chinese and some other languages. And one of my Korean students says, hey, I got this at home as a Korean edition of your book. So I emailed the publisher and I said, I didn't know we were in Korea. They said, we're not. Get a hold of a copy. It's pirated. We'll go after them. And I said, no, I think it's cool that it's in Korea. You know, I mean, if it wasn't pirated, maybe I'd get $100, you know. If I get $1, I get 50 cents a copy, and they sell 500 copies, I get $100. So what do I care? It's cool that my book's around the world. But, so I recorded my lectures and put them on YouTube, and they've, some of them have like 30,000 people have seen them all over the world. So I think that's cool. MIT, everything they have goes online, free, no password. That's their attitude. They don't have to worry about, are we going to lose students? It's MIT. People, if they can afford to get there and they can get in, are going to want to go there because you're set for life. But their attitude is, our responsibility is to make this, it's knowledge. Knowledge belongs to the world. We make it available. So you can argue either way. I'm on Twitter, but I don't do anything. And these are the courses I teach. Survey history theory. Course on creativity. Frankly, Wright kind of material. I'm into techie stuff, you might have guessed. I do a course on that occasion. If you want to know more about me, go to johnlobell.com. So bio, resume, lots of my articles are PDFs are on there. Anything I can get on there. And if we go here, you've got other things to do, but I've been thinking about what should Pratt be doing? So here's my website, and here's the center is the blog. And so this is a dozen short essays on what Pratt should be doing to wake up and be part of the real world. So if anybody's interested in my thoughts about that, they're online. So any questions about me, who I am? Okay, now before I forget, let's go to Camtasia, stop recording.